Well, hello there. My name is Mark Miles, and I love helping trainers, presenters, workshop facilitators really take their results to the next level. And in today's video, I want to really equip and empower you as an online trainer and presenter with some skills to really engage your audience. Have you ever had a situation where you've been delivering on Zoom and you've had crickets, you've had silence, or maybe you've just had like zero interaction with your participants, or maybe you've just been trying to run activities, but nobody's been getting involved, or you've had a great message to share with the world, but people are just not buying your product, so to speak, or even buying anything that you're actually sharing with them. And what we need to appreciate is that online delivery is very different to face delivery. And I've done a number of videos on that. But in today's video, I really want to share with you, if not expose to you, the tools of the professional. The tools of the professional. And basically, what I've discovered is that face to face, you could be amazing. But if you don't have the tools that I'm about to go through for online delivery, you are really, really missing a massive opportunity. Now, here's my story. When I got onto the face to face, when I got into the online world, for me, I was very nervous. And I was very much about, all right, let's open up the Zoom and let's open up textbook, page. And I would hope that people were listening. I would hope that people were following along. But very quickly, I realized that if I wanted interaction, if I wanted engagement, I had to go after my audience and actually create it. And I realized that it was really up to me to create that engagement. And I started to look around. I started to look around at other presenters, other trainers that were delivering online and delivering online very well. And I started to listen very carefully to what phrases they were using and how they were setting things up so they got optimal engagement and attention by their audiences. You see, the last thing that you want is someone logging in and then logging out 5 minutes later, or someone logging in, turning off the camera, and not being involved, or someone logging in and then falling asleep. So, the last thing you want maximum engagement, you want maximum retention of information. So, why wouldn't you actually create that kind of environment? So, let's get into exactly how to do that. And ultimately, the mindset is nobody gets left behind. Nobody gets left behind. And if you have that mentality, then you're going to make sure that everybody's involved. And you are going to make sure that you don't move on until you've got responses from every single participant as part of your online training, online workshop, whatever it may be. Now, what I'm about to share with you, you'll be able to use on Teams, you'll be able to use on Zoom, whatever program you're presenting with, you can use these phrases. So, not yet, but in a moment, I'm going to bring up a document. I'm going to share with you the core phrases that you can implement as an online presenter, online trainer to really bring your sessions to life. All right. So, let me bring it up here. So, the first one that we're going to look at is number one, does that make sense? All right. Now, we need to appreciate that when you are delivering online, you need to make sure that your message is connecting with your audience. So you need to check in with them. And that's no different to if you're delivering face to face. You need to check in with them. Does that make sense? So hopefully that makes sense there, folks. Does that make sense? All right. Now, next one. We need to get very comfortable with using and utilizing the chat box. And many people run away from the chat box, but the chat box is literally the best engagement tool that you're ever going to have. Now, the chat box is a place where people can type in their messages or type in their responses. And this is where you want to be gathering information from your learners. You want people to be responding to the questions that you pose to them. So, typically in the Zoom environment or the Teams environment, most participants are on mute. So, you still need to be able to gather responses. And the best way to do that is the chat box. So, let's jump into it. So, number two here, it says, if you can see my screen, type yes in the chat box. All right, folks, I have to be very honest. I have to share with you. There are many times where I thought I was sharing my screen, but they couldn't see it. And that was on me, folks. I hadn't taken the time the moment, the self-awareness to go, I wonder if they can see it or not. So you've got to check in with your audience, actually ask them the question. If you can see my screen, type yes in the chat box, right? Or another one is, if you can see my slides, type yes in the chat box. Or another one is, if you can hear the audio from the video, type yes in the chat box, right? Please, 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 don't be the person that forgets to check, because you're going to have those awkward moments where someone says, we can't see your screen, or we can't hear the video, right? Amateur, please don't do that. Make sure you check in with your audience as you're playing it, board 4, you show it, after you show it, whatever it is, make sure that you check in with your audience, all right? Now, let's check out number 3. Number 3, we need to highlight to our audience what we really want them to capture and walk away and use. And one of the ways that we can do that is we can say the expression, grab a pen and write this down. Grab a pen and write this down. Grab a pen and write this down. Naturally, you're not going to say it like that, but you do want to get into the habit of saying that, and then maybe saying that, grab a pen and write this down, because it's going to come up later on. Or grab a pen and write this down. It's going to be critical information, and I'll be asking you a question about it later on. Because at the end of the day, training, it's not about how much information we get through, but how much information actually gets through to our audience, and they ideally go away and use it, right? So we need to highlight, what do we want them to actually remember, right? And if we don't do that for our audience, then they're not going to realize what's important. So we need to highlight it for them. All right. So first of all, we got, does that make sense? Next, if you can see my screen, type yes in the chat box. Right. Next one, grab a pen and write this down. Next one, number 4. If you type yes in the chat box, right? Now, it's a great expression, and it's a really powerful thing to do to get regular yes responses in that chat box, right? So, for example, if you've been to Paris, type yes in the chat box, right? I'm just throwing out random examples here, right? If you're talking about leadership, all right, if you think leadership is important in growing an organization, type yes in the chat box. If you have ever worked for a great leader that transformed your life or transformed your thinking, type yes in the chat box. Next one, if you would agree that leadership is lacking in many organizations out there in the world right now, type yes in the chat box. Right? Can be anything at all, but this closed response type engagement is so powerful and such a simple way to draw people into your content or your topic. Here's another example. If you've ever been nervous before you've been public speaking, drop a yes in the chat box. Right? If you would love to get over that nervousness, drop a double yes in that chat box there for me. Now, you can be as creative as you want, but if you type yes in the chat box, right? Really powerful phrase, really, really simple, and I use it all of the time. Next one, let's check out number 5. Just so I know that you have got that, type X in the chat box. All right. Now, this is a really powerful one, very similar to grab a pen and write this down, grab a pen and write this down. But this one, you can say something like, all right, we've just covered leadership, we just covered blah, 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 blah. Just so I know they got that. All right, there's 3 core things to remember in leadership. Just so I know that you got that, type the number 3 into the chat box there for me. Another one, let's go with influence. All right. So if you want to influence an audience, it's so important that you are authentic. Just so I know that you got that, type the word authentic into the chat box there for me. So what you can do is highlight key concepts that you want people to remember and get them to put that word into the chat box, right? Now, another variation of that, or an extension of that, is if you are showing slides, that leads on to number 6 here, which is the biggest thing I want you to take away from this slide is, now, how many times have you been to a workshop or, a training session or whatever, where the presenter has maybe shown 100 slides, 50 slides, 20 slides, and you're like, oh, God, slide meltdown. I get it so much. Your job as a trainer, though, is to really highlight the key information that you really want to get across so that they capture what exactly you want them to take away. So The key thing that I want you to take away from this slide is blah, blah. All right. Every time you show a slide, you really want to be telling your audience the number one thing that you want them to take away. All right. Now, on this slide here, we got a bit of a typo. We got a 6 and a 6. All right. So, would you agree that it can be awkward if there are typos on the screen there? Would you agree? All right. Now, I love this expression here. Would you agree that? Okay. Now, this is a really powerful expression because what we need to appreciate is if you want to influence anyone, you must first have rapport. In order to have rapport, you must first have agreement. Okay. Now, in order to lead the hearts and minds of your audience, you need to avoid pockets of opinion. And we would call that fractionation in the training world, right? So you never want to create fractionation. And ultimately, if you want to influence, you have to have agreement first of all, right? Now, it's a deeper topic, and I go through it in a deeper video, and I'll definitely share that video with you. But the expression, would you agree that? Would you agree that being able to present powerfully online is important? Drop a yes in the chat box if you would agree with that. Would you agree that most people at some time in their lives have been nervous before they present? Drop a yes in the chat box if you would agree with that. Would you agree that many people are worried about the cost of living right now? Drop a yes in the chat box if you would agree with that. Would you agree is such a powerful way that you can really create a problem and then lead them into the solution? Or it's a way that you can actually build agreement and agree to the idea before you take them into the new idea. And would you agree that possibly knowing these phrases could really transform your online presenting? Just to recap, does that make sense? If you can see my screen, type yes in the chat box. Grab a pen and write this down. If you think that leadership is important, drop a yes in the chat box. Just so I know that you got that, type safety in the chat box, whatever it may be. Coming down, the biggest thing I want you to take away from this slide is blah. All right. Would you agree that typos are awkward? Would you agree that? Would you agree that? Would you agree that? Now let's head to the last one. My absolute favorite. Would it be a problem if? All right. And we need to appreciate that all training is ultimately, sorry, I'm going to say it, a solution to a problem. And all new ideas have to first go through the filter of the listener's mind. And if the listener does not believe that there is a problem big enough to be solved, then they're not going to listen to you. Why is it worth their time to listen to you? So let's go to number 7, one of my favorites. Would it be a problem if the turnover of your company with staff was really high and you were starting to get a bad reputation for your company? Drop a yes in the chat box, that'd be a problem for you. Would it be a problem if there was zero engagement on your online deliveries and you didn't know how to create them? Would it be a problem if maybe you got frustrated by that? Drop a yes in the chat box if you got frustrated by that. Would it be a problem if there were a number of accidents at your company and the situation never turned around and maybe the company even ended up in court? Would that be a problem? Drop a yes in the chat box. Would that be a problem? And would it be a problem if you wanted to go out there and grow your company, but you didn't have the strategies to do that? Drop a yes in the chat box. That'd be a problem for you. Or would it be a problem if you turned up at work and you didn't feel confident for the day that you're about to encounter? Now, all those examples, I just thought of them on the spot right there. But what you can do is you can create any kind of problem that leads into the solution that you're about to talk about. Maybe you're a marketer and you could create a question such as, would it be a problem if you had the most amazing product but people didn't know about it and you were really struggling to get the word out? Drop a yes in the chat box if you think that would be a problem. You can get so creative with this phrase. It is so, so, so cool. All right, folks. So in this video, we've covered 7 phrases that you can use in online presenting. All right. So the first one is, does that make sense? All right. It's so important to check in with our audience. Next one was, if you can see my screen, type yes in the chat box. If you can hear the audio, type yes in the chat box. If you can hear me and see me, type yes. And like, just make sure you add that in and check that they can hear you and see you and do like they're experiencing it the way that you want them to experience, right? Number three, grab a pen and write this down, right? And get proactive about this. Grab a pen and write this down. Grab a pen and write this down. And use it. Don't use it every second, but use it regularly throughout your session. And then at the end of it, make sure they've taken notes, right? Number four, if you type yes in the chat box. If you have been to Paris, type yes in the chat box. If you think safety is important, type yes in the chat box, right? Number five, just so I know that you got that, type X in the chat box. Just so I know that you got that, type engagement into the chat box. Or a variation of that is, if you don't want to, stretch people with the spelling, you can just say, just so I know that you got that, type the letter E into the chat box for engagement. It's another strategy to use. The biggest thing I want you to take away from this slide is blah, blah. Biggest thing I want you to take away from this video is blah, blah. All right. Next, would you agree that typos are awkward? Drop a yes in the chat box, right? Number seven is, would it be a problem if you didn't know these phrases and you constantly had boring sessions? All right, folks. So I just wanted to share those phrases with you because they have been life-changing for me. And I really think that when you don't have the skills, the tools, the tactics, it can be frustrating. I really wanted to equip and empower you with those. Highly recommend that you rewatch this video and grab a pen and write those down. On that note, folks, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, share. Let's get this out there and let's really proactively take the results of our online sessions to the next level. And let's always be thinking, it's not what I say that matters, it's what people remember and go and absolutely use. On that note, folks, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.